Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Content Chat, the first Content Chat of 2026. I'm your host, Erika with my special guest host, Maureen Jann, who's been helping me out these past few months as we gear up for something really exciting that's happening next week, which is the launch of Content Foundation. So, kind of a fun way of tackling things today, because Maureen's going to be putting me in the hot seat for once, because we're going to be talking about everything content governance related. Because, I finally got around to writing that, what is content governance and why does it matter to you? Blog post and pushed it live in advance of this, because it's something I've talked about so much. And I was like, wait a minute, have I really not published a post on my own blog about this, even though I've talked about it in the newsletter, talked about it on LinkedIn. So yeah, it's very top of mind. And with that, Maureen, do you want to take a moment to tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm Maureen Jann. I'm the Director of Marketing of North America at Untitled, a tech company that focuses on endpoint management and digital workspaces. But I have been a consultant, and I have been a writer, and I have been a designer, and I've done all the things, which always makes me a unique and slightly lively guest. But today I get to use all of my experience and my nonsense and my life experience. And now I get to ask you questions about something that I know about tangentially, because I think it's one of those things you really have to understand in order to run a marketing department. However, I don't think I've ever put it in the level of formality that you have, which makes you the expert, which means I get to learn from you today, which I'm very, very excited about.
Thank you. I'm totally excited too, because this is something, it's funny because when I sat down to think about it, I was like, what was the very first time I put content governance stuff in place, and what was it? I'm like, oh my gosh, it was one of my first real jobs. I'd actually working for a nonprofit that had 9 chapters. How do you get consistent inputs for creating content for your newsletter from 9 individual volunteer run chapters? No. You create a flyer that's a form for them to fill out, don't you? So yes,
you do.
One of my very first jobs, I created my very first piece of content governance, and that just is hilarious because I didn't know that was a thing, and I had no idea that it was going to become my jam. But it really did. It took off.
I bet it did. And I think it's probably more important today more than ever, just because there's so much gray goop out into the world, as we have talked about in previous content chats. So before we do anything, and I know you wrote a blog article about it, but I think you should just summarize it here. What is content governance? Why does it matter? Who cares?
Well, I know when I first started in my first big corporate marketing job, I thought content governance was this annoying group of people who would come after us. They were the brand police, and they existed to make our lives miserable by having us fill out things like a creative brief form that asked for a bunch of information around messaging that I didn't have. I'm like, we don't have any of that in my business group, and I don't know what I should put here. So for me, my first taste of it was not good. And I think that happens for a lot of folks. They think content governance is this yucky, system that's going to limit them and tell them what to do and be just one more thing on their to-do list that they don't want to do. Kind of like using SharePoint. Excuse me. I just was having a flashback to Enterprise Life. But really what content governance is it's that bridge between your content strategy, which is what you're saying you're going to do, those objectives and goals you're trying to reach and how you're going to get there. Content governance is all of the systems, processes, and tools that you put in place to actually execute against that content strategy. It's, that middle layer between the strategy and the actual output. And when you don't have that stuff, that's when you end up with kind of random output that's all over the place. You end up with a website where you can tell that there are different people who updated different sections on the homepage. Or worse yet, that you're in there in a piece of content and there were clearly very different writers for different parts of it, or who've gone in and edited. And all of those things just detract from your brand and from, people feeling like you have that unique point of view and that consistent perspective. So for me, content governance is this amazing thing that, absolutely takes your content strategy from that thing that you spend all the time putting together and documenting into your day-to-day work. It really is so important.
Okay, well, so I have, in my experience, when I've got two versions of this from a content governance standpoint. I have been the person who has set the content governance because I was working with a small team, but we were getting a lot of input from a lot of places, and we needed to make sure there was consistency. So we created some rules around that to make sure it sounded like one person. And then I have worked at organizations that have set up content governance structures, but haven't properly rolled them down to the people who actually do the writing. And so to your point, when you have those moments where you're reading the messaging stuff and you're like, I don't know what any of this means. So I think that goes to the next question I have for you is how do you scale content governance in a way because that works on a wider, for larger organizations, because it, when I was the boss, it was me making sure that it didn't suck and it sounded right. Or I had an editor who I trusted who combed through everything to make sure that it flowed properly. So how do you do this at scale?
Well, I think the first thing that I have done with every single client I've had and every single time I change jobs, the first thing I always do is I take a look at all the existing brand documentation, and then I try to come up with a brand voice chart. And what makes the brand voice chart different from all of those other things that say who your brand is and how you're supposed to come across is it's written from the perspective of, so if you're a person creating content, what do these brand attributes actually mean as far as how you approach creating content, the methodology for creating your content, things that you would do or not do, making it all very tangible. And I always like to use the example of I'd come into a disruptive startup back in the day that had irreverent as one of their brand attributes, that they were irreverent because they were disrupting, right? And here's the thing. I've worked with a group of people that irreverence was really one of their core attributes. It was KPBS On Air Magazine in San Diego, which was an internship I had during college. They were irreverent because that was 100% the personality of the editor. So it was very, cheeky, sassy, but they also only worked with professional writers. So let's go back to that startup. You can't expect a bunch of normal people who are not writers to be able to write in an irreverent manner. Yep. Further, there are people for whom irreverent is snarky, kind of mean. Think like the Wendy's tone of voice on social, right? But what they meant is irreverent as in not being in love with the way things used to be done, looking at things from a different perspective, having like a unique example or that you're putting forth, a different point of view. And so that was actually very, very different. So, once I actually had that in a brand voice chart, then we stopped getting stuff kicked back for being too weird or, just too much. Because, things people would be trying to be irreverent, but the CEO would be like, no. So it's so much about finding out what do people really mean when they're saying those words, because what they think those words mean may not be what they actually mean. And it doesn't matter. All that does matter is that all those people who are making those decisions and who have to sign off on things, that you understand what they mean and what they want. And then you tell your, everybody on your team who's creating content, okay, here's how that turns up. Like if you're going to be authoritative, then that means you have to have really good proprietary data that you're using. If you want to be seen as an expert, you're always going to be backing things up with a quoted source that you're citing and that you're linking out to that source. So understanding that these words go deeper than just, hey, these are the kind of colors we're using, the kind of images we're using, that it involves all of the different things, all the elements. So that's always the first step.
And then it sounds like there's a point where like you kind of hinted at this idea where if you don't have this established, if you aren't already like getting buy-in from everybody on the brand voice or the elements that are part of the governance suite, then there's a risk alongside of that, right? Like getting things kicked back when they shouldn't be. But I'm sure there's other risks.
Well, the biggest one is you can't really scale if you don't have these kinds of tools in place for people to use. So the brand voice chart, I think, is amazing for people who have writing as part of their profession. So your content team, your marketing team, your PR and comms team, for all of those folks, that tool is going to be So helpful. Usually,
Sure.
with just a little bit of explanation, some examples, they're going to be good to go with that. But those shouldn't be the only people in your organization creating content. And spoiler alert, they're not. Your salespeople are creating content. Your customer service people are creating content. So many people are creating content. And even when you have that kind of stuff in place that's really good, they may not even think to use it. So you have to do things like create a brand voice, custom GPT or gem, some sort of a tool that has all those examples built in. It has your content governance templates in there. It has your brand voice in there. So they can say, hey, I need to write, an email to a client about XYZ, help, or here's what I wrote. How can I make sure this sounds more on brand? And then that way there's an on-demand, immediate response where they can get that coaching and feedback without having to go through you or me. Because we don't have time to review everyone's content, and nobody wants to have a human gatekeeper. It feels friendly to get that coaching and feedback from that AI that you've trained in a way that it never feels friendly when a human being has written on your work, and comment on it and sent it back. Why is that?
I don't know, but there's literally nothing worse than getting somebody being like, I wrote this thing for you, and then have it come back with like red lines head to toe, and you're like, oh. But if the GPT comes back and says, here are a couple of suggestions, you might consider in this paragraph changing it to this. You're right. Maybe it's just that the redlining is just so. I don't think it's
and the human judgment. It's the human judgment that another human read what you wrote and was like, oh, this isn't good enough. I don't like it. Whereas the AI, the AI doesn't have feelings. And it doesn't have feelings. It's just like, this could be more on brand. Here, have you thought about this option? It gives that complete, that very non-judgmental, very objective kind of feedback that isn't really objective. It's based on what somebody told it. It's based upon input that it was given and guidelines it was given. But there's just something about it that people are like, oh, the AI said we should do this, so let's do it. Whereas if Erika or Maureen say we should do this, well, maybe we grumble, maybe we do some of it, maybe we don't do any of it, right? So I do think it's kind of amazing that this has become such the super tool that you can use for these situations.
It's so true. It's true. And then the other part that I think is kind of interesting about it is AI is unfailingly friendly unless you train it to be different. And in addition, I think that all of the good manners that come with that friendliness really does soften the blow.
Yeah.
And I think as sort of a final point there, I think the other part about it is that it's not have you ever gotten an edit back and you're like, this is not better, it's just different?
Yes, 100%.
And
this is your opinion. This is your preference. This is not actually a brand edit.
Right. So you just changed it. You didn't make it any better. And I don't think that you have that experience as often with AI. So
I agree. Because it doesn't feel the need to add value.
Yes, exactly. It's just like, nah, according to what you've taught me, that's not the right answer. That makes total sense.
Exactly.
So, okay, so say you have this GPT, right? And you're using it to help sort of scale your content governance, but you have to train it.
Yep.
What are you putting in?
So, absolutely you start by putting in any of your brand guidelines that you have documented. So that way it does understand who you're trying to be. But you also want to tell it who you're not trying to be. So who are your competitors that you're trying to differentiate from? What are things that you would never do? And then giving it examples of your best content, the things that are doing the best job of explaining who you are or showing it through your content, living your values. So you put all of that kind of stuff in there, as well as having really good structured templates. So for example, if you're having a brand voice GPT, that's all you want that GPT to do. It's for brand voice. So you put in everything that's related to making sure that things sound on brand and conform to your standards. But then you might create an email GPT that then you're telling it all of your, showing it your templates for emails that you've put into your email marketing systems. You're showing it, hey, these are our best performing subject lines. You're giving it data and examples and very specific templates and guidelines for the individual tasks. The same way that if you were hiring a new hire, like somebody early in their career or new to your organization, you're hiring them to come in and to do marketing tasks for you. You're giving that same level of onboarding that we should be giving humans and we don't always give.
I love explaining my AI work as having a tireless, ever-failing, friendly assistant that doesn't get their feelings hurt, but you have to train them on the same level. I've had exactly the same advice out, and I'm sure that everybody knows this by now, but it does feel like it still needs to be said to make sure that we're not skipping any steps. So,
because a lot of folks are just using, they have a paid account, they have all of that history there, but a lot of times people are just going in and saying, hey, I need to write an email. And they're saying that just into their AI window without having, trained the model on their audience, on, their brand. And when you do that, you're going to just get something really generic. And I know lots of people are doing that because my email inbox is full of people doing that. Worse yet, like one of the things that's obviously turning up in AI is it's telling people to, hey, most websites have a contact us form. Go ahead and use that contact us form and choose PR and pitch your business, your services to this business through that form using PR. And and I know that because every day now I've gotten up to like 3 or 4 per day of people doing this.
No.
Yeah. And so I can tell that somebody somewhere is either selling this as a to-do or it's coming up in AI. And so we're seeing that happen, and it's really ineffective because guess what? I have a business services option on my info. Okay. If you want to pitch me a service, you need to use that. And if you use PR, I'm not going to read that. I'm not going to consider you because you can't follow basic instructions. Why on earth would I ever take the time to work with you?
Yeah.
So, that's the difference between somebody using AI randomly and somebody using AI that they've trained, because if they've trained it, they hopefully have trained it so that way whenever you're starting a new piece of content like that is supposed to be like account-based outreach where you're targeting an individual, that it's asking you, well, who is this individual? What is their website? What makes them, an ideal client for you? Your AI should be asking you questions that help you do a better job, that help it also understand what you're trying to accomplish and who you're trying to reach. If you're just using it to create mass emails that you're spamming out with the tool, it's not going to be any better than the mass emails everybody sent.
Nope, that's very true. And I think that the secret weapon of all AI, if it's not actively asking you questions, is what am I missing? What should I be thinking about? What do you know that I should know? What are you seeing in the market that I'm not covering? Things like that. Because otherwise, they just become sycophantic, right? Just have these, yes people or yes AI agents just confirming what we already, our own bias, which doesn't work in so many ways. We do have a question. Oh, you already highlighted it.
Christina Huddart asked, AI does a great job with brand governance on text. Have you had much success with AI brand reviews for images, audio, or video content? And I think that's a great question. I would say for video content, no, it still does not understand what is on brand or off brand, which kind of makes sense because, it still has issues with understanding that humans don't have webbed fingers in general, or 6 fingers, et cetera. So, there's some things that I think it still is definitely lacking when it comes to brand review. But on the flip side of that, I do think that if in the situations where I've had a really good brand style guide that had those examples of on-brand versus off-brand photos, that photo images, it has been able to look at stuff and say, hey, this feels a little off-brand or this color is wrong. So I don't think it's there yet for video content. Audio, we certainly use tools for transcribing audio, and they're pretty good, but there's still huge issues. Like it took forever to get our transcription tool to spell my name correctly. in the transcripts from this podcast, which we do every week. And, my name is right there in the account. It's in there as this was my meeting. And still, it took forever for it to spell my name the same way. So, if it's getting some of those basic things wrong, it's not going to be able to get bigger things right. So, Christina, to your point, I think it's still a pretty long ways away. But I do think we will be able to see some progress sooner than later. But for right now, humans, unfortunately, do still need to be involved with audio and video from a governance review standpoint. But images, I think AI can frequently do that first pass and at least give you a thumbs up, thumbs down.
It would be super interesting. I know that there are lots of tools that do this kind of governance as something they do, but I don't know if I have seen, and maybe I don't know everything about AI tools in the world, but I think that a governance tool, AI tool, would probably go like gangbusters, right? Because
I know, right?
Yeah, it feels like a missed opportunity.
Because when I was doing the research for my book and putting together the blog post I published today, one of the things I'm asked every single time I present about this is people say, well, what platform do you recommend for content governance? And I always say, well, I don't think there's a good platform yet for content governance because there's just so much that these platforms don't do. So like from a general content governance platform perspective, at a very basic level of being able to set templates for your digital marketing, to have task assignment workflows, some automation and approval chains and all of that. You have things like HubSpot or Contently, Compost, or even Sprout Social that, are good for specific use cases, but they don't actually do all the things. They have huge gaps in what they can do. And specifically, they have the gap with being able to tell you how on brand your content is. So you still are having to use, whether it's a Grammarly plugin that you have the paid version and you have it trained on your brand voice, or or you're putting it out to a tool to do that. You still have to use another tool to get that. Hey, is this on brand or not? Does this meet our use case? And then you have so many workflow management tools, which end up becoming kind of the de facto content governance. But all that really is it's automating the approvals and the workflows, but there's still a huge amount of human involvement. And some of them can be pretty hands-on and need a lot of human involvement. But there are a bunch of them. And, I've used Monday and ClickUp and Airtable, Binder, Playable, Trello, and Notion. And then some folks have, said, hey, gathered content and Workfront are really helpful too, but I have not used those. I used Workfront very minimally. So there are all these tools and they all have very specific things that they're good at, but they're not comprehensive. And then for like style guides, hyperlinks, we've seen for years at Content Marketing World and other places like that, they have a real-time content feedback, but they don't have all of the rest of the stuff that you would want in a platform. So I do agree. I think that somebody is going to figure this out, hopefully sooner than later, and create a really good comprehensive governance platform, because it's silly that it's having to be still such the human-led thing.
Is this your next $1 million idea?
I don't want to run a software company. I don't. But if somebody's interested in co-founding that company with me, slide into my LinkedIn DMs, all right? Because I don't want to do that part, but I would love to be the chief content officer to talk about all that. That would be perfect role for me.
Yeah, and I just think like how simple this could be. You'd be like, open up, load my style guide, load my voice and tone, load my ideal, different formats of content, and use it as sort of like a check and balance for everybody in your organization. So by the time that content gets to you and you're doing a final check and you're getting to posting or you're doing whatever, like it's in 99.5% good shape and you're doing the last 5%. Psh, that's amazing, right?
Magical. That would be magical.
So good. Yeah, I love this idea, and I feel like it's a missed opportunity if somebody doesn't do it. But what was that?
I said, well, hopefully somebody will. And then hire me to be their chief content officer.
or, partner with Erika. So, okay, well, I've gotten us on a tangent because I got excited about the topic. And honestly, apparently having a little break has reignited my brain for new ideas, because I got another new idea before we started this podcast. So I was like texting somebody like a maniac, but
that's the best.
So I know, right? It's nice. I actually got some sleep, but I think this actually sort of dovetails into the next part of our conversation about like using. I mean, we talked about how AI helps the governance, but how does governance help AI, right? Like, because we have a bunch of people out in the world generating AI slop. Like, let's look at it from the other perspective.
Well, the AI wants to make you happy. That's the great thing about how it's programmed. It wants you to say good job. It wants to, it wants to yes and. It wants to do something that you love and give you that next thing to do. So it's very eager. It's very much a golden retriever kind of technology, as opposed to some of our more like aloof, standoffish cat technology. And I say that as somebody who has both cats and dogs in her office right now, as a matter of fact. But seriously, when you aren't having governance in place, the AI can't possibly give you what you want, because it can't read your mind. Even if you're using Whisper and you're talking to it all the time, telling it all the things, it doesn't know what the maximum length of a headline can be for the way that you've set up your templates in your marketing automation system. It doesn't know that you have somebody on your SLT who's just, has pet phrases that they hate, like that they don't want to ever empower anybody or enable them, that those words set them off and then they won't approve something. Like, it doesn't know that. You have to tell it that.
Yep.
Otherwise, it's just going, well, in general, the average of all of the things that I've consumed say that this is what, a welcome email should be, or this is what a blog post on this topic should be. But then that's what anybody could get. Everyone would get something very similar by putting in that prompt and asking for that thing. So governance really helps the AI sound like it's coming from you, which is the whole point, right? It shouldn't sound like it's coming from any other organization. It needs to sound like it's coming from you and reflect, your best practices and your own audience and what their needs are. And it's funny because, like, I was recently asked by a new client, oh gosh, we're a little surprised that you said, we should try posting on Monday on LinkedIn, because we heard that the best day to post on LinkedIn is, Thursdays. And so I went and I dug up a really great post from Sprout Social that reiterates that's somebody's best day to post. Doesn't mean it's your best day to post. Right. Because even though lots of platforms have certainly aggregated data from all of their different clients, you don't know what the best day to post is for your audience, or the best time to post, until you start creating content and you start sharing it. And then you look at your own data and you find out. And frankly, you can download that data and ask the AI based upon this, what are the next times that we should be trying?
Yes.
Are there any days or times where we've gotten no traction that we should avoid? Your own data will tell you, because maybe you have people in different time zones, significantly different time zones. Maybe you have a global audience. Maybe you have a hyper-local audience. Your day and your time that is the best time to post on a specific channel is going to be completely different than everyone else's.
Absolutely.
So I think that's the big thing, because otherwise, AI will tell you with great authority something that's completely not correct for you, because it's some conventional wisdom that, people keep spouting, and that it's just ingested enough of it.
And I think that goes back to ensuring that you're training it on your information and your audience, and making sure that it knows it. And then you need to know your audience too. Like, you can't fully lean on AI to be able to generate this stuff. So you also need to be able to check and balance it with your own information, your known knowledge, as somebody who is an expert in the field. It is a tool. It is not a nanny. It is not your bestie. It is a tool, It's also not the chief AI officer in your organization. You need to be able to check and balance it, or else you're just going to end up you'll just get junk out, right? And,
exactly. And we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing it every day. All the, I love adorable animal videos when it's really an adorable animal doing an adorable thing. I happen to be a bulldog mom. I have an English bulldog and a French bulldog. And when I see AI videos of English bulldogs doing things that if a real English bulldog did it, they would break their legs. Yeah. Like some of the things showing them like jumping up on a table and jumping off of a counter and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, that would literally break the tiny little legs on your English bulldog. And people are like, wow, that's so amazing. It's like, no, it's not an amazing video. It is an AI generated video that doesn't understand how these little animals actually, they don't bend that way. That's how you actually injure your dog. And that's what's so scary to me, is that so many people will see AI content and not think that it isn't real. So you have to remember that so many people are just accepting things at face value. So you need to make sure that your inputs and, your training data for your AI tools, that you know what's in there. Because trained on generally available content, or like, let's say you're using an AI tool trained on things people say on Twitter, X, you're going to get a lot of misinformation. You're going to get a lot of heavily biased content outputs. You can't do that. I mean, you can if that's who you're trying to reach, but you really need to make sure that you're reflecting who you're trying to be and who you're trying to reach.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I was actually reviewing this morning SEM rushes and Martech's study they did on where AI is getting their information from. And it's often it's a combination. So Reddit and Wikipedia were the top two for a really long time. Yeah. And I just want us all to take a moment of silence for Wikipedia being a source of authority, because that's horrifying.
I remember people being told, no, you cannot cite Wikipedia as a source for doing anything. But now it's accepted as a source.
Well, I think as an old lady, we have to take a moment of silence, because that's nonsense. And so, but what's interesting as well is that because Reddit and Wikipedia have sort of dropped off in September, where now we're seeing LinkedIn becoming one of the top sources. And we know how much garbage is on LinkedIn. It's not all garbage. It's not all garbage, so I'm not trying to, throw shade or anything, but it's just really important to remember the source of this information comes from all kinds of places, and not all of them are great, because if you've ever been on Reddit, that is full of a lot of hot nonsense too. So we just have to be careful, and you have to question what you're reading. And I think what we're seeing is a huge backlash of like trust issues with organizations. We were already on the trust downgrade to start with, and now we have all this AI junk. And I know that like the conversation in the IT space is they don't even want to talk about AI because it's just been overdone. So I think it's really important for us to just make sure that we're not, you can't take things at face value anymore. Like you said, it's just not a thing. We also need to use our big fat human brains to actually identify what sucks and what doesn't.
Yes, 100%. Because just because you get an output from the AI and it says this is something, amazingly on brand, you need to use that as a starting point. You shouldn't be using things whole cloth as they've been output. You want to go in there and tweak it. And if you want it to learn from you, then you can put it back in. So that way it can see what did it do and how did you change it to make it feel more on brand. And what's amazing is when you do that, then sometimes it'll give you an amazing idea that you wouldn't have thought of for how to take 100%. It even further. So having that back and forth, asking it to ask you questions to make sure it understands your perspective. All of those kinds of things just really are going to give you such better outputs, and you're going to get so much more value from how you're using AI.
Well, here's my next question for you. Considering how big the governance concept is, I mean, there is a lot to handle here. And if you want to do it right, how do you define the roles, the workflows, and the editorial standards? How do you I don't even know what to say because that seems like a very big job, and I'm not sure what the right question is to answer here, but how do you do that?
Well, you have to actually sit down and have that whiteboard or have that sheet of paper. I actually recommend doing either of those things where you're actually physically writing versus trying to type it. Because if you try to like start any tool to map out the workflow, I found frequently it feels like it's too big of a project. But when you sit down and you have like a sheet of paper or a column on a whiteboard for, let's say you tackle like, what are the 5 types of content that we most frequently do? Okay, you write those things down. And then for each one, you're like, all right, what are all the steps involved? And you start mapping out, okay, first you do this, and then you do this. And you keep adding those things back in, doing your little arrows, make sure you get things there. And then you're like, who are the humans involved? What are the technologies involved? So, doing that kind of, messy, scratching it up kind of process to figure out what is it like now. But that doesn't mean that you need to replicate how you're doing it now in your, AI or automated system, because this is your opportunity to look at it and go, does this feel good? Is this, happening in a timely manner, or are there some areas that are problems? And then you can sit down and actually have conversations with those humans who are either doing the work, approving the work, or in charge of the tools that are causing the blockages, and having those conversations and saying, hey, we're looking to use AI in our workflows, and this is a huge kind of gap or an opportunity or a sticking point, and just having those conversations, so human to human, to figure out how can we improve it, and having it be that kind of conversation. You can't get around there being some of the things that only the humans can do. Only the humans can come together and agree, hey, this is broken, and how to fix it. So once you've done all of that, then that's when you can start saying, all right, here's how we can then bring in the automation and where it is helpful, where the AI is helpful to the process, and what things we don't need humans to do, because there are lots of things we don't need humans to do.
Right. When you think about the process of defining roles and workflows, and then developing editorial standards, do you think it's different between a small team, like for instance, I'm like a 1 to 2 person band, right? Versus a large enterprise team where you're dealing with several people and multiple stakeholders and that kind of thing? How do you discern the difference?
Well, the thing is if you want to scale and you ever want to move beyond just you, the human being, doing everything, if you even want to be able to use AI, you have to identify what the process is. So even though it can feel like overkill when you're a 1-person content team or a 1-person marketing team, talking about the roles and responsibilities, because even if you're the only person doing the doing, you still have somebody else who is, in charge of IT at your company, or who is the, the CMO or the CEO who is going to be giving you input, or those, subject matter experts. You still have other humans who are involved in your process. And you want to identify the places where you can take yourself out of the process by documenting and training an AI. So I think that either way, you are going to have to still go through some of the things. And it can feel weird. Like it can feel weird putting together a really nice editorial calendar and editorial standards when you're one human managing all these things, but you're literally putting the groundwork in place so that you can scale with people who aren't part of the content team creating content, for example. To do that, you need to have an intake form that helps them think through, what's the objective? Who am I trying to reach? If they only have one thing that they take away from this, like you need to have all that stuff in an intake form if you want to work with another human. But frankly, you need it for yourself too. You need to have that discipline that you're not starting a blog post by opening your CMS and typing in a blog template. You need to not do that, because that's not strategic. That is a random act of content right there. It's 100%. You've got to think through who are you trying to reach? How does this relate to the rest of my content? Even if you're just one person, you have to have that kind of planning and structure document that you do first. And like we use one for the podcast, we use one for all of our blog posts. Every time we create any content for a client, it 100% has all of that kind of intake and planning stuff, the strategy up front. And that's agreed upon by everybody before anyone writes anything.
that does make sense. And I think when I was working with small businesses as a consultant, one of the things that I found was useful, and I think it probably translates here, was the idea that even if you're a one-person company, that if you set up the infrastructure and you think it through, it means that you can make automation work for you because everything is standardized. So
Yep.
doing that groundwork up front means that you don't have to do as much legwork every day.
100%. Just think about something like this is a LinkedIn live stream that also goes to YouTube. That's because the connector is set up so that way the YouTube channel automatically is doing it at the same time that this is going live on LinkedIn. But to even set up a LinkedIn event, you have to have the title that has to fit certain parameters. You need to have, your image that you're putting at the top of the event page, plus the alt text that goes with it, and your description for what you're talking about. And if you just go over to LinkedIn and you start from scratch, like, oh, we're going to do a LinkedIn Live, and start typing all that in from scratch, it's going to be a mess. It's going to take forever. That's one of those things that you can actually have as part of your training for your AI, so that you start, because we do have the Content Chat Recap Pro that I programmed that puts together the working planning document for every session based upon the inputs I give it. And that sometimes that's a paragraph of what we want to talk about. Sometimes it's the big questions we want to dig into. But, having it do all of that, so that way I'm not scratching my head and going, what else? Oh gosh, what should we call this? Or what's a good way of describing this? It knows what our way is of doing all these things. It knows what our formula is for introductions and what have you. And it just gets all that stuff ready. And we still go in and we tweak it, but it just speeds everything up. And there's no, oh my gosh, I don't have 15 minutes to do whatever it is, because it's only going to take a minute, because you already have all that, because you already put in your inputs, and it's able to give you the output structured in the way that you've already told it needs to be. And that is just an amazing time savings.
It really is. And it really just shows how much ease and simplification can be gleaned from good upfront work, right? Good training, good established boundaries, making sure that everything is within, that everything ties back to the main themes you're trying to accomplish during a year. And, most of us in the content space are doing themes. So what if you started just there, right? You could just start with the theme and say, does this fit into one of your themes? Even if you start with just that question alone, really, you're doing your leaps and bounds ahead of where you might have been before.
And when you do something like have all that stuff in an editorial calendar where you're tracking what the topic was, its URL, all of these different, metadata kind of things in the spreadsheet, then you can also then ask your AI, hey, are we actually meeting our objectives that we outline in our content strategy? Do we have any big gaps here? So you can use the AI to hold you accountable. It can be your accountability partner and tell you, you said that you wanted to work on growing your newsletter subscriptions, but you haven't been using the call to action to subscribe to a newsletter in anything that you've been doing. And you're like, whoops. It's really good for those kinds of things, because we're so busy and there's so many things you're trying to remember and to accomplish that you can sometimes lose sight of the bigger picture, but you can 100% just have it in your calendar. Like maybe it's every Monday morning as you're planning out your week, you're uploading the refreshed version of your analytics or the refreshed version of your calendar, and you're asking your AI accountability partner, all right, how are we doing against our documented strategy? Where are we? What should we be doing this week that we didn't do?
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, that's like the best case scenario. So speaking of best case scenario, I would love to hear, what does the perfect content governance scene look like? Set the scene. I mean, let's see. You're in Candyland. Everything's perfect. Everything's edible. What? And what does content governance look like when it's done right?
Well, it's funny. I'm going to give two examples that are both from my time at Schwab. I worked at Charles Schwab for 10 non-consecutive years. And that's where I really found a welcome audience for putting guidelines and templates in place, and for figuring out, how to have that consistency, how to do things in a highly regulated space, and get them done quickly, because people had kind of accepted the idea that if you were creating anything, well, there's going to be a week for compliance review, and then there was going to be a week for legal review and however much time for your review of the content. So you couldn't possibly get anything done in less than, a month. That was best case scenario for any kind of a communication. And the thing is I was asked to take charge of, critical, crisis critical and regulatory communications. So frequently I didn't have the luxury of having months to do things. Frequently it was something that was very immediate, such as, let's say there's a blizzard and we had to close a couple of offices, or there was a freak blizzard where our statements, when people would normally get paper statements coming out, and so the plant was closed and we needed to notify people. Before that was my job, every time it was a brand new process. It was a brand new starting from scratch. And the first time I had to do some of those projects, I was like, wait, what? Really? We fumble around in these things? Why would we ever do that? And so, I started putting together the checklist of, here are all the things that we need to do for this kind of a scenario. And then as part of our risk management, we actually put together, templates and scenarios and who needs to be notified at which juncture and what are all these different cases. Well, I had a meeting last fall with somebody who used to work for me, and she told me, we still use your web guidelines that you and your colleague Steve put together when you were here. She's like, they've been updated, obviously, but we still use those guidelines. I'm like, that's so amazing. She's like, oh my gosh. And when there was the flooding, we totally used the whole package that you put together for when there is inclement weather. And, you just put in, into your template, the date and the specific kind of thing and the impacted places. She's like, it was just so easy. It was so easy. So this is work I did 15 years ago that is still saving people time today. But the thing I was most proud of is occasionally, if you're on the internet, you're going to have outages, right? And they're not your fault, and no one cares that it's your fault or not. They care that there's an outage. And you don't want people going on social and saying, oh my gosh, is this website down for you? I'm having problems. You need to address it immediately to keep that trust. Yeah. I once was able to go from realizing there was a problem, creating the message, and getting it up on the website when we were having a DOS attack, 7 minutes. And that was with me not being the one who could push the button. It had to get legal review, compliance review, and have the publisher on the publishing team actually publish to the website. 7 minutes. That is what content governance excellence looks like. That was Candyland Nirvana. People could not believe that we got it up so quickly. And it meant that we didn't get a bunch of calls to the call center. We didn't get a bunch of negative stuff online. We just said, hey, we're aware of this issue. We're working on it.
Yep.
And that gives people confidence. And of course, the IT team had set it up so that when there was a problem like that they could have that, takeover of the homepage that just told everyone, hey, everything's going to be fine, but right now stuff's not working.
Yeah.
And all of that, that for me was such a great moment. I patted myself on the back. I was like, 7 minutes.
Dang. Badass.
Amazing, right? And that you're confident about it. That you didn't misspell something, that you didn't link out to the wrong thing. You didn't put the wrong phone number because you're not scrambling. Because when you're stressed and you're scrambling, that is when you make mistakes that cost you that trust.
It's true. It's true. And you've already done all the work, all the legwork. So those moments of, I think, what was it? There's this phrase called, this is why we practice. We do all this practice and we do all this work up front. So that way, in the moment of performance, like that's go time. And you've already done all the hard work, right? So I love that. I think that's really cool. Well, I know we're coming to the end of our time today. So I think you should fully just push your book. Tell us all about it.
Well, this is going up Content Foundations. It's my first fully me book. And it's everything I know about putting all those foundational elements in place to really be able to scale your content in an authentic way and to invite all those people across your organization into the fold so that you are creating content that every piece, that's sent out, every communication, every interaction with a customer sounds like it's coming from you, so that you have that know you experience without having to be 24/7 chained to your virtual desk. I want everybody to be able to take vacations, to have time at home with their email turned off. That is my goal. And I do feel really strongly that, what I go over in the book can help you do that. And yes, spoiler alert, first chapter is about brand voice, because I cannot tell you how rare it is for me to come into an organization to find a defined brand voice. Even if they have beautiful visual branding, even if they have, here's, who our company is and our primary attributes, they almost never have anything in place that actually says, and so what? What does that mean for me as a content creator?
Yep.
So that's where we start in the book. And we've got lots of great examples in there, some templates, and I'm just so excited because this is what I've been talking about for years. And frankly, I did an AMA workshop, a 2-hour workshop that was all about, putting together these systems to really be able to scale. I've done marketing profs and content marketing world sessions on various elements. So it was finally, time to put all of that together in book format. Just give people, once you can have the book, once you can take that book into your office at work, because you're having to return to work, you bring that in and you set it down on your desk, right? And then you can start having those conversations. And so it's not just you saying, guys, we need to have order in this chaos. We need to agree upon systems. We need to agree upon workflows to save everyone's sanity, to make everyone want to come to work. Now you can say, I'm reading this book. And that way you can have a neutral third party be that intermediary between you and the people on your team that you need to convince that you've got to do some of this foundational work. Because it's, it's so easy now to publish. It's so easy to just start doing things. And then no one ever goes back and puts the right guidelines in place or says, are we even doing what we need to do to meet our goals? Because there's so much emphasis put on just doing things, the move fast and break things approach that Silicon Valley really made popular. That's not, people don't want that. They don't want to be part of you breaking things. Nobody wants to pay for you breaking things. All right.
It's true. It's true. It's true. Well, I'm sold. How do I buy one?
You can go on to contentfoundationsbook.com and you can pre-order either the EPUB version or the paperback. Or if you're a Kindle reader, you can go on to amazon.com and type in Content Foundations or Erika Healed, and you'll see the book pop up, and pre-order is open now. And the book launches next week on Tuesday.
Woohoo!
So
I'm gonna go buy one. Yeah.
And if you sign up before the 13th on the website, then you're going to get some extra goodies from me. So
I want extra goodies, especially from you.
Well, you know where to go.
Wonderful. Well, this was super helpful, and I learned a ton about governance. It's funny. I think it's one of those things that as marketers, we do, hopefully we're doing instinctively, but it's so nice to have somebody who has like a 10,000 foot view of the topic, who can really help us put all those bits and pieces that we've been trying to put together to help organize our marketing and content marketing worlds into like just a larger box that's nice and organized. So you're always one to give great context and great perspective. And I can't wait to read your book. And thank you for coming on Content Chat.
Thank you for putting me in the hot seat. And I can't wait to hear what you think of the book.
I can't wait to share.
All right. Bye, everybody. We'll be back next week.
Bye.